Hello, everybody. I'm Cody.
And I'm Brent.
And we are the Hugonauts, here to review and discuss for you the best sci-fi novels of all time. This week, we are talking about Double Star by Robert Heinlein. And make sure you like, subscribe, download, follow, however you listen to us, to not miss our next episode, which will be on Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. That's going to be a fun one.
So fun. Yeah. I know you guys only get 2 weeks notice, but like try to pick that book up. I guarantee you will read it in like 5 days. Crazy page turner. So you can read that one before it comes out. Anyway.
Yeah. Very sweet. And this week we're stoked to talk about very good, yet less oft talked about Heinlein novel, Double Star. So, Brent, why don't you give us the summary and get us into it?
Yeah, 170 pages, 6 hours on audiobook, so it's nice and tight. It's quick. And the story is told first person from the perspective of Laurence Smith, or as he styles himself, Lorenzo the Great. Incredibly entertaining character. We'll talk about that. Anyway, he's a down-and-out actor who spends most of his time in bars. But this space pilot approaches him, and despite some trepidation about Lorenzo's obviously like incredibly high opinion of himself, decides to offer him this very high-paying job. Lorenzo accepts with basically no information, but turns out he has to impersonate like one of the most important politicians in the solar system who has been kidnapped. And he's quickly pulled deeper and deeper into this conspiracy, and his failure would be catastrophic. He might die, interplanetary civil war sort of situation. And despite those high sounding stakes, like this is a light, fun read. Yeah, let's get into it.
I really like Double Star. It might even be my favorite Heinlein.
Ooh, okay. That's very high praise.
Yeah, I give it a 4 out of 5. It's quick, fun, silly page turner that gives a lot of great insight into the modern politician and the difference between public and private identities of politicians and politicians as a celebrity and that cycle. I really like Double Star.
Yeah,
How about you?
I do too. Yeah, I'll also give it a 4 out of 5 for a lot of the same reasons. I'll also just say it's so hard to not like Lorenzo. He's such a likable main character, but also likable because he is not likable. Like at the beginning, he is so full of himself. He is arrogant. But this is, it's like a thing that you expect in every book, but I feel like it's actually a rare thing for the character to like change. And this character changes, and it's so interesting to watch along the way. And he's just really funny. At the beginning, when he is so full of himself, like, oh my God, this is a hilarious book. So anyway, yeah, 4 out of 5.
Yeah. And as you pointed out, with Lorenzo's changes, I feel like if we're going to start talking about the plot here, we really drive for the first half. A lot of action, a lot of mystery, drama, and then it does slow down a little bit toward the back half, which is something you pointed out. But I think what it does when it slows down is really delves a lot more into the personality, the idea of a person changing their identity, and also the idea of you get a lot more into the idea of what a political figure means to the public and what they're like in their private lives.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely did like the first half more, where Lorenzo's kind of a schlubby guy, and there's all this mystery we're trying to unravel. But I do think the second half is good too. I just didn't like it quite as much. And the whole thing just has... Heinlein is like a controversial guy, but like love him or hate him, it's pretty clear he's like a very talented writer. And it just... This is a book where like from the description, maybe like doesn't sound like that much is happening. And also, frankly, this is a plot that like has been done many times before in lots of other kinds of styles. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But Heinlein just makes it such a fun journey along the way.
Yeah, and you also get this, the other thing to say about the plot is Lorenzo is the narrator. So there's a little bit of there's a little bit of play with the unreliable narrator trope, because Lorenzo thinks so highly of himself. at the beginning and speaks in these kind of like Shakespearean theater actor, like a Laurence Olivier type dramatics about how great he is. But then through dialogue of other characters, you realize he's maybe not the best person and also not maybe that successful as an actor. But that does change as the story goes on.
Yeah. Yeah. I would also say that using him as our narrator and our worldview, the other thing that does really successfully is he's so focused on himself. He like doesn't know that much about a lot of other stuff. And that's a really interesting way to sort of get us into this sci-fi world in the future, you know, because he sort of doesn't know how a lot of things work, doesn't care, frankly, also. And that's a fun way to like get into this world. And it also makes it really, it's not overwhelming. Like you don't need a wall of exposition because like Lorenzo just doesn't care about a lot of stuff. And so we don't have to either. And so you get to sort of like slowly find out how things work in a really organic, nice way. I think having him be the narrating through his eyes was a really successful choice. So
yeah. He doesn't care. And B, also, even though he has such high self-esteem, it becomes clear that he's not very successful and he's never had the means to experience all of the crazy technology of the universe that Heinlein puts us in. So he just doesn't know what it does because he doesn't have any experience with it. And part of not caring about it feels like he's trying to downplay that he's not had the means to experience it. And part of it is his indifference or his intelligence level. There's a great part where he starts to describe the way that the ship's drives work when he's getting transported from the Earth to Mars over several days, and he just kind of bungles the E equals MC squared equation by Einstein, is aware that he's bungled it and says, you know, basically, what was some math stuff? Who needs that anyway? So it's fun to see something described like that instead of editorialized down by the author, to say, this is the world I thought of. Here's how it works. Look at this. This is cool. This is cool. You're just seeing it through the fleeting glimpses of the character, which keeps this story ticking and makes the universe feel lived in instead of impressed upon you by the author, by Heinlein, which is, you know, one of his talents.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the things he is most known for is like pioneering that idea of not, he does not do exposition at any point ever. It's just you only see it through the eyes of what is happening, and it's works really well. What did you think about the? So, what did you think about the other characters?
Yeah, there's a lot of maybe noir is the right word for a lot of the other characters. These political kind of like union bully type guys who are the people who are really running Bonfort's campaign and policy and making things work behind the scenes. You've got Dax, who's the person who involves Lorenzo in this scheme in the beginning, and he's kind of a tough guy. He's a pilots union, traders union lobbyist who ended up being part of the Bonfort campaign to open up intergalactic trade, or inner solar trade, rather, solar system. And he's, you know, he and Raj and Bill, the other people who run the campaign and the policy, I have this a little bit of this like kind of mafia, like, get out of my way, I'm going to get this done, whatever it takes vibe, which plays in nicely to the story.
Yeah, and it feels like it fits with when the book was written in the 50s. It's like that part feels like 50s-ish.
Yeah, there's like tough guys. And then the other thing that it fits into that framework, the unfortunate other side is you got tough guys and then you've got dames, or, you know, one dame, Penny, who is Bonfort's secretary, and is close with Lorenzo in the scheme. And her getting won over by him is part of the plot's progression. But but I would say when you said Heinlein is controversial, often it is because of his portrayal of female characters, and he doesn't really do himself any favors here. She doesn't take away from the story, but it's not,
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's a little disappointing.
It's got that golden age of all the golden age of sci-fi stuff has some sexism in it. This definitely does. I will also say it's much less in your face and less bad than lots of other books from this time period. This is not one that I feel like is like super in your face, terribly sexist. But it is sexist.
Just disappointing. Like more could have been done here.
Yeah, we don't have any stranger in a strange land moments. We don't need to wander into that situation. But anyway, yeah. And I'm also realizing we should mention Bonfort. That's the politician who Lorenzo needs to impersonate. We mentioned him a few times there. But anyway, yeah. So that's the guy Lorenzo steps into his shoes.
Right, which he's a politician who's trying to bring Venus, Earth, Moon, and Mars, the human diaspora, together, along with other races like the Martians, who we see a bit of their culture. I thought that was kind of a fascinating part of the novel, that Heinlein just invents, this alien race who's got a very very different way of living and being, and is well thought out. The physics of how they came to be and interact on Mars, their technologies, and their culture is very different from humanity's. They
have hives, right?
Yeah, they live in hives. There's a mythology. There's a little mythology story you get to describe like why Martians care so much about propriety. So it's all this little stuff that feels kind of like an afterthought, but is totally fascinating and adds to the world building in a very natural way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and they also have like the scariest weird technology in
the death wands
in the book. Yeah, the death wands, which seem a lot like guns, but anyway, they're scarier than guns for reasons that are not entirely clear to us.
And won't be to you either.
Yes,
but they're just sticks that punch holes in matter.
Exactly, but you don't want to fight Martians. This we know for sure.
Right.
And that's a big part of the, we got to make sure we keep the peace. That's why we got to do all this. So anyway, we talked on that note of tech. We sort of mentioned this is a golden age of sci-fi story. So like, yeah, there's interstellar travel, a lot of like big industrial kinds of things happening. But I would say like sort of because of the success of Heinlein and Asimov and the other writers at this time, it's like the standard science fiction stuff that you would expect. Not a lot that's surprising. It's standard, of course, because it was done in books like this so successfully. But I think, not too much not too much that feels like new ground here 70 years later.
Yeah, I would say that what we've already said, but bears repeating is what's interesting about it is the way it's described through Lorenzo as the narrator, and not from the authorial perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that keeps it fun.
Yeah. You were pointing out something interesting when we were talking earlier about the themes and sort of like how politicians and actors are compared in the book. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting, so Heinlein, I guess in the foreword of the book, if you listen to the audiobook at least, and probably in some written version, you'll hear the story of why Heinlein wrote Double Star, and it's because he wanted to retell Man in the Iron Mask in a science fiction way, because his contract was to write a science fiction novel. He still had some books left on his contract, and he just moved with his wife Ginny to Colorado Springs, and become friends with actors, and he was really interested in the process of acting and how it worked, and so he decided he would use an actor in the frame of the Man in the Iron Mask story. And I think he makes I think that's probably the most interesting thing about the book, is that this constant pointing out of being a politician not being that different than being an actor, which is also obviously incredibly prescient. Like celebrities become politicians more and more and more frequently. Um, and the idea that they're just supposed to be a public personality that captures the hearts of the public, while everything else is being done behind closed doors, and it doesn't really matter who's doing the actual being the politician, as long as they're saying the right things and acting the right way, and all that the actual work is done by others. And it makes the book matter at a level that you can continue thinking about it beyond its pages, which is really fun when combined with also a fun, good plot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and a plot a plot that we've read so many times before. To your point about Man in the Iron Mask, Prince and the Pauper, like so many. This like people stepping into someone else's identity is such a common trope that's been in books for hundreds of years, but it still feels fresh and new and really interesting here. So, testament to how well done this is.
Yeah, I think especially because it points out something hyper accurate about politics that we all don't like, but I guess must admit.
Yep, for sure.
The inevitability.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. It's a public. I wish so many of them weren't acting, but here we are. I think Heinlein probably doesn't like politicians very much, is my takeaway from this book, and also lots of other books he's written. But yeah, his complaints here are I think feel fair.
Yeah, yeah. And weirdly, I mean, you found this, but wasn't this the first Heinlein Hugo?
Yeah, it was. Yes, this was early in his career. He ended up over the course of his career, he won 6 Hugo Awards, more than anyone else ever has. 4 regular Hugos and then 2 retro Hugos, which is for a while they were also giving out awards for the years before they started having Hugo Awards. Anyway, he won 2 of those. But yeah, this was his first one that won. So this book was early in his career, before some of his more famous stuff: Stranger in a Strange Land, Starship Troopers, Moon is a Harsh Mistress. That all came later. And I would say, if you've heard that Heinlein's a controversial figure, this is still a really good book to read. I think there's not a lot of that controversy here, and it's a really good way to get a feel for his style as a writer. It's really entertaining. It's light. It's quick. So anyway, yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's totally good. And it also has that feeling, sometimes I feel like I'm looking for a more golden agey book, right? Like you're looking for something that's like, remember when they thought that technology would be this easy and this simple, and it removes you from the need to feel realistic about like, well, is this an accurate representation of AI and the internet and all this? It's so removed. That kind of science fiction technology of the golden age almost feels like what's a comparable, like steampunk or something, where it's like an alternate history of technology that you're familiar with how it works and what's going on there, and it's kind of realistic, but you can kind of just drift into something that feels like old and cool instead of having to compare it too much to your own life. And I think that Double Star is a perfect book for that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, this one, it doesn't feel like dated, anything like that. This is still like a fun, great book. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, so should we do...
I mean, that's about it.
Yeah, should we do the similar books?
I know it's short, but, Double Star, good, fun. Check it out. Maybe my favorite Heinlein, which I might get crucified for, but that's okay.
I don't know that I would say it's my favorite, but I would definitely agree that this one is underrated. I think a lot more people should read this book. I think it's incredibly enjoyable and deserves more attention than it gets.
Yeah. And like we said, has some good lessons. I really like comparing it to modern day politics. It's like, he nailed it.
Yeah, for sure.
So similar books. Why don't you take us off?
Sure. Yeah, I would say if you really like this, and Heinlein has a very distinctive style. Like if you read this book and you like this and you like Heinlein's style, get into some more of his stuff. Mentioned before, his most famous books are Starship Troopers, Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and Stranger in a Strange Land. Also really, really love Have Spacesuit Will Travel. I think that was actually even written before Double Star. But in general, there's just like, he wrote so much stuff, and it's always, he's got a very particular style, which on that note, maybe go to, you want to do Vonnegut next? I feel like that's a good tie-in.
Yeah, sure. We'd also recommend just kind of general Vonnegut stuff. Slaughterhouse-Five. Maybe we'll do an episode on Slaughterhouse-Five one of these days. Cat's Cradle, Sirens of Titan, Welcome to the Monkey House, my personal favorite. It's a collection of short stories, but I think it's his best stuff. Timequake, also great, but kind of need to have read the rest of it. I'm speaking too long about Vonnegut. I really like Vonnegut, but we recommend Vonnegut because he's got a very similar tone. He's a goof. The stories are easy to kind of just blast through and enjoy because they're silly, but they also have some really interesting ideas. He's a little more concerned with time and identity, and maybe he's more off the wall than Heinlein for sure. And some of his books can get a little bit too kooky, but a lot of really interesting insights Vonnegut has into the human condition. He's got so many good quotes about, how to be and what living should be about.
Yeah, so it goes.
So it goes.
But yeah, I think he and Heinlein both have that. It's a really rare thing in sci-fi. Like the writing just doesn't feel like they're taking it too seriously. It just like feels. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I really like that comparison. Anyway, yeah, last recommendation, we'll do a Mirror Dance by Lois McMaster-Bujold, because it's about people, swapping identities. It's a clone in that one. In her Vorkosigan Saga series of books. You don't have to read them in order, though, so if you wanted to just pick up Mirror Dance, you could. I would probably start with the Vor game before that, but you don't have to. But yeah, they're similarly like very strongly character driven, not super focused on like the science a portion of things, but really entertaining, plot driven, character driven books. And that one in particular, Mirror Dance, is about swapping identities. So it feels like a really good fit for this one.
Absolutely. So yeah, check out Double Star. It's easy, and then associated reading if you want. But otherwise, we will talk to you or talk at you, I suppose, next time about dark matter.
Yeah. And we're back also. This is the official end of the holidays. So we're back every 2 weeks. We'll see you in 2 weeks for dark matter.
Yep. All right. Later, man.
Bye.